Welcome to the Introduction to Management course, Lecture 5. Today we're discussing Chapter 4, Managing in a Global Environment. For today, we will differentiate between ethnocentric, polycentric, and geocentric attitudes toward global business. We will discuss the importance of regional trading alliances and global trade mechanisms. We will describe the structures and techniques organizations use as they go international, and we will explain the relevance of political, legal, economic, and cultural environment to global business. So let's get started. If you think about international business, you will find that mainly corporations or global managers have to answer three main questions when it comes to internationalization. First, why I want to go global, and then where I want to go, and finally, in which way or we have to discuss the modes of entry. First, we will start by why companies go global. So there are three main reasons why companies decide to internationalize or go global. We have market-seeking motives, cost reduction motives, and strategic motives. For the market-seeking motives, here we're talking about going to a new market or a foreign market in order to target new consumers or expand our market. Why? Maybe because our local market is saturated or the local market is small. Okay, which do you think or in which countries do you think the markets are saturated, in the developed or in the developing economies? Surprisingly, in the developed economies, their markets are saturated because the competition is very tough, and therefore their markets are somehow saturated. And also some of the developed economies, their local markets are considered relatively low because they have low populations. So in other words, in countries where the population is big or is huge, there is a potential for expanding in these markets, and therefore companies go to in order to expand their operations. So another reason why companies go global is because the product life cycle of the product I'm producing is relatively short. What is a product life cycle? It is the cycle by which the product passes by from the introduction, then growth, maturity, and finally decline. When the product life cycle is relatively short, I have to make sure that the product is sold simultaneously in different markets before it becomes obsolete and or outdated. So moving to the cost reduction motives, here we're talking about motives that is related to reducing the cost, and one of the strongest incentive is cheap labor. In the past decade, China had the best market for cheap labor, and when we talk about cheap labor, we talk about cheap labor in comparison to its productivity. So in Egypt, we have cheap labor, however, they are not very productive, and therefore they are not cost effective. So one of the labor hubs nowadays is Mexico. They are building a very strong labor hub for attracting investors to come and have their plants in Mexico. Another cost reduction motive is eliminating transportation costs. But again, here I have to carefully consider the cost reduction in relation to economies of scale in the home country. When I go and internationalize in another country, instead of exporting the product from the home country to the foreign country, I go and produce the product in a foreign market in order to eliminate transportation costs. Another cost reduction motive is avoiding environmental regulations, and this is particularly true for companies located in developed economies where the environmental regulations are very high, and therefore I choose to go to other countries where the environmental regulations are low or not enforced. Maybe they are there, but they are not enforced, and therefore I reduce such costs. Also, there are strategic motives, and here by strategic motives or strategic decisions, we are talking about decisions that are made to maintain or enhance competitive position of the company in an industry or a market. Sometimes companies decide to internationalize in order to follow their customers or their competitors, something known as the bandwagon effect. And also another thing is that I use this market in order to generate profits, and then I will invest this profits in another very important market to me, which is known as cross-subsidization. Other strategic motives is related to the first mover advantage. I want to go there in order to make sure that I'm the first in this market, such as the tough competition between P&G and Henkel. They both are competing on which is operating in a relatively larger number of countries. And also I might go for a vertical integration or even to export to a third country. What do you mean by to export to third country? I go and have a plant maybe in Mexico, because there is a trade agreement between Mexico and US, or Mexico and Canada, and therefore I can export my product to a third country. Or the political environment in China is very rough and it's unstable, and therefore I will go and locate in a country near China, and then I will export my product to China. So here we'll go through some of the most powerful Egyptian MNCs in 2018, and by MNCs we mean a multinational corporation. According to Ford, we have 4 Egyptian companies in the top 100 powerful companies in the MENA region, and these 4 countries are CIB, the Swedish Electric, Orascom Construction Limited, and Orascom Global Telecom. Here are some examples of Egyptian companies who've gone global. In the food sector, we have Mu'min Group, and I'm not sure that any of you heard about Mu'min before. It was very popular in the 1990s and early 2000s. However, due to turbulence in the economic environment, Mu'min was not able to continue as successfully as the company was in the early 2000s. But what they have done is that they opened several locations in Libya, in Sudan, in Dubai, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Malaysia. And therefore, as we have discussed before, this is a true example of how internationalization can help companies continue operations even if they failed in the home country. We also have CIB, as we have mentioned before, one of the most powerful companies in the Middle East, and also we have Mansour Group, and here we're talking about the conglomerate, and the difference between a multinational and a conglomerate, that it has a wide range of or it operates in a wide or different industries. Mansour Group is an Egyptian multinational conglomerate with operations across the globe, and the company is the second largest company in Egypt by revenue. It is the largest General Motor dealer in the world and the 5th largest distributor of Caterpillar products globally, the products that are used for construction. It also has contracts in Egypt to represent a range of international brands, including McDonald's, Chevrolet, Red Bull, UPS, and Imperial brands, and it operates Egypt's large supermarket chains such as Metro and Khair Zaman. And the company also has a private investment firm which is based in London called Man Capital. The company reported in 2016 revenues of 6 billion with more than 60,000 employees, and it is operating in 120 countries. We also have Trafico Group, which is a travel and tourism company in Egypt. It is one of the largest travel and tourism companies in the Middle East, and surprisingly, you don't know about. Why? Again, because they are very concerned with their internationalization, and even if they are not very popular in the local market, they are extremely powerful and successful multinational. Trafico Group provides transport ranging from air travel to cruises, as well as accommodation for tourists, and the group owns more than 150 hotels, resorts, and cruise ships, and handles more than 1.3 million tourists annually. We also have another successful example, which is the Swedish Electric in the industrial sector, and we have Orascom for the real estate and construction sector. Among the companies of Gun Global, also we have Gabur Group, we have Seaware Systems, we have Azza Fahmi, we have Global Telecom, Giza Systems, Octane, and also we have Timroza in the fashion industry, and we have Zuba. Now in this part of the lecture, we'll talk about the global perspective, and we'll talk about different global attitudes of multinational corporations. So let's start with what is parochialism, and here it is viewing the world solely through one's own eyes and perspectives. And what is wrong with parochialism? It is that you do not recognize that others have different ways of living and working, and therefore you see everything from your own eye, and you fall in the trap of not getting what others want to say and how they work. It is considered significant obstacles for managers working in a global business world, and it is falling into the trap of ignoring other values and customs and rigidly applying an attitude of ours is better than theirs to foreign cultures. So who do you think go into this trap more often, people from developed or developing economies? If you think about it, you'll find that people from developed economies fall in this trap more often because, again, they believe that they are coming from superior, better performing economies, and therefore they know the know-how, or they know the right way of doing business. And therefore, they are more likely to have this global perspective. So we mainly have three possible global attitudes: the ethnocentric attitude, the polycentric attitude, and the geocentric attitude. First, an ethnocentric attitude is the belief that the best work approaches and practices are those of the home country, the country in which the company's headquarters are located, and managers with such attitude believe that people in foreign countries don't have the needed skill, expertise, knowledge, or experience to make the best business decisions as people in the home country do. And this is exactly what we have mentioned previously. For the polycentric attitude, it's a view that employees in the host country, the foreign country in which the organization is doing business, know the best work approaches and practices for running their business. Managers with this attitude view every foreign operations as different and hard to understand, and thus they are likely to let employees there figure what is the best thing to do in their regions. The geocentric attitude, on the other hand, it's more of a word-oriented view that focuses on using the best approaches, the best people from around the globe. And here, managers with this type of attitude have a global view and look for the best approaches and people regardless of the origin. Again, as we have talked previously, just like organization culture originate, also global attitudes originate the same somehow. Where? From the founder of the company. So it's very important to recognize that it's not necessarily true that polycentric and geocentric would be better than ethnocentric. Sometimes, in some cases, companies who have the ethnocentric global attitude, and they are very successful in the market. So it depends on the environment, it depends on the markets I want to operate in. All of this would have an implication on the success of the attitude, whether it is going to work or not. So moving forward to regional trade and alliances, and here I have to understand the trading alliances that the country is engaging in order to know what are the opportunities and constraints that would be presented in this market. Here, as you all know, the global competition and global economy are shaped by regional trade agreements. And here we are presenting three of the most important trade agreements before we present also some of the regional agreements for the Arab world. We have the European Union, and it consists of previously it consisted of 28. Now they are 27 since the UK exit the European Union. They consist of 27 European nations created as a unified economic and trade entity with the euro as a single common currency. So they do not only encourage free movement of labor and capital, they also have a common currency. We also have the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is the NAFTA, which is an agreement among Mexican, Canadian, and US governments in which barriers of trade have been eliminated. And here there are a lot of arguments on how the NAFTA had benefited the US and Canada, and how these countries exploited the resources of Mexico. We also have the Association of the Southeast Asian Nation, and this is also another very successful trading alliance in some Asian, in 10 Asian nations to be specific. This is a map for the European Union map. And now we'll move to the regional trading alliances. And here we're talking about trading alliances for the Arab countries. And as you can see, there is a number of good alliances, but due to some political instability, some of these alliances might not be in effect. Actually, they are more of political alliances. We have the Council of Arab Economic Unity, and it was established by Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Libya, and some other nations back in the late 1950s. And this organization aimed to achieve economic integration, promoting an environment free of movement of labor, capital, and services. We also have the Greater Arab Free Trade Area, known as the GAFTA. It's a pact made by the Arab League to achieve complete Arab economic bloc that can compete internationally. And this project was adopted back in the 1997 with 17 Arab country members. And the agreement also aimed at reaching full liberalization of trade among member states and facilitating commercial activities. A very effective cooperation is the Gulf Cooperation Council. It was created in 1981, and it consists of the Arabian Gulf states of Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and United Arab Emirates. And the objective here was to have a coordination and integration and interconnection in all fields, and strengthening ties between the people while formulating similar regulations, fostering scientific research and technical process, and also encouraging cooperation of the private sector. This is the countries for the GCC countries. And also, it's very important, if we're talking about the global environment, it's very important to know the World Trade Organization. I'm sure that all of you heard about it, but you do not actually know what its role is. It's a global organization of more than 150 countries that deals with the rules of trade among nations. So mainly the role here is to formulate trade rules to be followed by countries. And another very important role for the World Trade Organization is that it resolves trade disputes and negotiations through the organization. It was formed back in the 1995, and it evolved from the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade after the World War II. Now we'll move to discussing different types of international organizations, and we have four main types. First, the multinational corporation. For the multinational corporation to have this title, you have to be operating in more than one country or in multiple countries. We also have something called the multi-domestic corporation, which is an MNC that decentralizes management and other decisions to the local country. And if you want to link it to the global attitudes, you can directly link it with the polycentric attitudes. Okay, so what do you think, in which industries they are more likely to have the polycentric attitude, or it's very important to have it in order to succeed? If you think about it, you'll find that in industries where local adaptation of products are required, such as the food industry. We have different tastes. If you looked into McDonald's menu across countries, you'll have different menu for Egypt. We had the falafel, for instance, for India, for Malaysia, for US. We have different. They customize their products according to the markets they are operating in. Similarly, Starbucks, they have different set of beverages offered to consumers across the globe. So here we have to decentralize management and give power and autonomy to local managers to take the right decisions because they know the consumer better. We have the global company. What is meant by global company here? It is a multinational corporation that centralizes management and other decisions in the home country. So more or less, if you think about it and try to link it to the global attitudes, you will find that it is directly related to the ethnocentric global attitudes. Why? Again, because they believe that they know, or they have a superior knowledge in managing business, yet although it is highly criticized in the literature, you can find a very good examples that are operating with such global attitudes, and Sony is one of them. Finally, we have the transnational or borderless organization, and here we are talking about a multinational corporation that uses an arrangement that eliminates artificial global barriers. So here we're talking about a company that reflects the geocentric attitude, getting the best resources, the best people, and the best operations from around the globe. So here, if you think about it, I'm trying to achieve two things. I'm trying to be locally responsive as much as possible. I'm trying to achieve something called global integration, in which I try to standardize some parts and at the same time be able to respond to local needs. So I'm getting the best of being efficient and being effective. And good examples are IBM and Ford. As previously mentioned, going global or internationalization revolve around three main questions, which is why I want to go global, and the second is how actually I can go global, or what is known as the modes of entry. Here this figure summarizes different modes of entry. We have global sourcing, we have exporting and importing, licensing, franchising, and on the highest end we have strategic alliance, joint venture, and foreign subsidiary. As you can see also in the graph, here I have minimal global investment, and there I have significant global investment. So let's think about it. If I'm a company that I want to test the market, will I go to a mode of entry that emphasizes or uses minimal global investment or significant global investment? So if you think about it, if I want to test a certain market, I will go for something with a minimal global investment, and if it works out, I can shift to another forms or another modes of entry. So for instance, I decided that I want to export my product to Europe. I want to extend my operations to Europe. I would start by exporting the product in order to test to what extent consumers like my product, and if they do, I can consider then later a strategic alliance or a joint venture. Similarly, if I'm talking about something with or a company with a huge internationalization experience, you can expect that if they have experience in similar markets, for instance, I had experience in doing business in different countries in Europe, and now I'm going to enter another country in Europe, maybe I can use a huge or a significant global investment mode of entry. Why? Because I have experience in this region. So it is directly related to experience and directly related to the size of business. Now we'll go and investigate the different modes of entry and how organizations go international. First, we'll talk about global sourcing and exporting. What is meant by global sourcing? It's very simple, that I purchase material or labor from around the world whenever it's cheapest, and as we have discussed before, I'm going to China because I know they have the cheapest labor. Now we have Hong Kong as well, India, and so forth. We have here an example: call centers staffed with low-cost English-speaking workers in Philippines, Pakistan, and India. We have exporting, and here what is meant by exporting, that the product is produced locally and then it is sold abroad. And there are different modes of exporting. I can directly export to a country, or I can use an intermediary in the middle in order to help me sell the product in the foreign market. And this intermediary, actually, you can either find it in the local market, in your market. So you go choose an office that is specialized in exporting, and you ask him that you want to export your product in so or so, and then they help you. Or you go directly to the country and find an intermediary there that will help you sell your product. In some certain cases, there is a special exporting arrangement in which I find a multinational operating in a foreign market, and I ask this company to distribute the product in return for a fee. So here we have some examples that are still working by the exporting mode. We have Red Bull, which is an Austria's brand, and till now they export their brand to Australia, and they do not have any facilities or direct investment in this country. For Egypt, we export strawberries, and Ukhtain also, when they decided to internationalize, they used an export model. Now we'll discuss licensing and franchising, and here licensing means that an organization gives another organization the right to make or sell its products using its technology or product specification, and it's normally used by manufacturing company. Sometimes people say that franchising is a type of licensing. Other books, they distinguish between the two. And here, according to this book, the difference between both, that one is normally used by manufacturing company and the other is normally used by a service company. Here again, for the franchising, an organization gives another organization the right to use its name and operating methods. And this is widely used among the fast food industry. I give you the brand name, I give you the designs, I give you the know-how, and in return I get a fee for such agreement. Let's take one of the examples of one of the most powerful or strong licensor for the year 2016. We have Walt Disney Company is the leading licensor with 56.6 billion in licensed products in 2016. They were reported as the world's leading licensor with brands that include Lucasfilm, Marvel, ABC, and among others, with a total of, as we mentioned, 56.6 billion, which is huge amount of revenue. Now we'll discuss strategic alliance, and another type, and it's among the types that need high investments. And here it's sort of a partnership between an organization and foreign company partners, in which both share resources and knowledge in developing new products or building product facilities. We have in this, according to the strategic alliance, we have equity and non-equity mode. For instance, here we have in the non-equity mode the Star Alliance. I'm sure all of you heard about it. We know that Egypt Air is among the Star Alliance. So what they actually share, they share resources in terms of in the airports. You know, they have to pay to rent the space for parking the airplanes, so it is shared among the members. And another thing that they can share the technical support, or they can share the kitchen, for instance, to provide services to the customers. Other examples of strategic alliance in the R&D, we have Microsoft and Nokia, Microsoft partnership for Nokia's Windows. We have Spotify and Uber. We have Apple, IBM, and Apple Pay and MasterCard, and we have BMW and Louis Vuitton. Joint venture is considered another type under the strategic alliance, but here the difference is that two separate companies, they come together in order to do some business purpose. They do it to have something to be introduced to the market. A very recent example of a joint venture is between the taxi giant Uber and the heavy machine manufacturer Volvo, and they had a joint venture in order to produce driverless cars with the ratio with an ownership ratio of 50-50, so they both control the company equally. Some other joint ventures, sometimes it's 40-60, and the one that has the higher percentage is the one who is in control for the business. The business worth was 350 million as per the agreement in the joint venture. So let's stop for a minute and discuss what actually are the drawbacks of joint ventures, and why joint ventures can actually fail, and what do you think the failure rate of the joint ventures in general. So what's the problem of joint ventures? Again, you're putting two companies with different corporate cultures at the same project, and therefore there might be a cultural misfit, and such cultural misfit can lead to drastic implications that can lead to the failure even of the project. So this is one thing, cultural misfit. We also have a strategic misfit. What do we mean by strategic misfit? That the two companies are operating or running their operations in different ways, and they have different strategic planning for their operations, and therefore also they fail. What is argued is that cultural fit is equal, if not of more importance, as the strategic fit. So what is the failure rate of joint ventures? It is as high as 50%. So even though they are considered a very famous way of doing business in the foreign market, because if they succeed, the returns are actually very high. Finally, we have the foreign subsidiary, and here it is considered one of the highest investments in foreign markets. And here I directly invest in a foreign country by setting up a separate and independent production facility or office. And this is a very common way, and sometimes I go for a foreign subsidiary because I did not find appropriate or good partners in the foreign market to have a joint venture, and therefore I decide to have a foreign subsidiary and run the business myself. And here we have Nike. They have a lot of subsidiaries across the globe. So now we will tackle more or less where to go. And in order to understand or to decide where to go, I have to know why I'm going global and what are the possible modes I have. And before I decide on the countries I want to internationalize to, I have to scan the market. And previously, in the previous lectures, we talked about the external environment and how they influence business. And here it's extremely important to scan the environment we have. If I'm new in internationalization, I have more than 200 countries that I can internationalize in. And in order to limit my choices, I have to do a quick scanning first and then go into detailed analysis for the more promising options. So let's see what are the challenges that will face managers in a new country. Okay, in order to decide where to locate, and I have to understand the challenges I will face in this country, and I have to examine it by examining the political and legal environment. And we talked about this also in the external environment before. We spoke about the importance of the political environment, and sometimes it's better to go in a less or a worse political environment that is stable than a better political environment that is not stable. We talked about the importance of stability and how the environment stability can help business forecast and help business to plan ahead. So it's very important for managers to know the stable legal and political system, because they have to be informed of the specific laws in countries and where to do in countries where they do business. It's not important also to know the laws, but you have to know whether these laws are applied or not. They are enforced or not. Some countries have risky political climates. However, again, sometimes I decide to go to the risky political climate because the motive that I have is different, or because this market is very important to me. So again, I scan the political environment. I also have to scan the economic environment, and here I look for two things. I look for the type of the economy, and I look for financial and monetary indicators that might influence my operations. Okay, for the free market, for the types of economy, here we're talking about two types. We have the free market economy. It's an economic system in which resources are primarily owned and controlled by the private sector, whereas the planned economy is the complete opposite, where the decisions or the economic decisions are centralized and controlled by the government. In business terms, businesses flourish more in free market economy. However, sometimes there is something called the mixed economy, which is not completely free or not completely planned. So I have to understand again the type of economy I'm dealing with. When I go to a country, I have to investigate some financial factors or monetary factors. There are a lot of factors, and the choice of factors would depend on the type of industry that I'm talking about. So some of the financial indicators that I can scan or investigate in order to understand the environment, the economic environment, we have the currency exchange rates. Here, to what extent the currency is expected to be stable, there are good predictions or not, and so forth. We have the inflation rates. Inflation rates have very important implications in terms of the purchasing power of consumers and how changes in prices is expected to be in the future. We also have to know the diverse tax policies and to what extent governments put diverse policies and how they are enforced. Another factor that I have to consider is the cultural environment, and the cultural environment is extremely important because they constitute the values and attitudes that are shared by people, and such attitudes and values, they actually shape their behavior and beliefs about what is important and about doing business. They have direct implication on doing business. So let's see how we can investigate the cultural environment. There are two very important models in investigating culture. We have the Hofstede dimensions of culture, national culture. We have the individualistic versus collectivistic. And the individualistic people look after their own and family interest, whereas the collectivistic people expect the group to look after and protect them. So on the extreme, we have the collectivistic, we have Thailand and Mexico, and from the individualistic countries that are considered individualistic, we have the United States, Canada, and Australia, and in between we have Japan. Japan was a very collectivistic culture. However, because they wanted to build the economy, they thought that the individualistic values are holding them back, and therefore they started gradually to have more individualistic values incorporated within their systems. Okay, for the power distance, here we're talking about the acceptance of wide differences in power, a great deal of respect for those in authority. So there is a gap between managers and employees, for instance, and here high power distance we have Mexico, Singapore, and France, whereas for the low power distance, in which plays down inequality, employees are not afraid to approach, nor are they are afraid of their bosses. They can interact freely, and we have Sweden and United States, and in the middle, and on the more middle ground, we have Italy and Japan. Okay, we have also the high uncertainty avoidance, which is the threatened with ambiguity and experience a high level of anxiety. And here on the high extreme, we have Italy, Mexico, and France. And on the low uncertainty avoidance, which are people are very comfortable with risk, they have high tolerance for different behaviors and opinions. We have Singapore, United States, Canada, and in the middle we have the UK. For achievement, we have values such as assertiveness, acquiring money and goods, and competition prevail. And here we have on the high end we have United States, Japan, and Mexico, whereas on the other side we have nurturing, which are values such as relationship and concern of others prevail more in the society. And we have here France and Sweden, and in the middle we have Canada and Greece. And finally we have the long-term versus the short-term orientation. For the long-term, people look to the future and value thrift and persistence. And here we have Germany, Australia, US, and Canada, whereas the short-term orientation, people value tradition and the past. And here we have Japan, Taiwan, China, and also we have the Middle East. Lightly, we have the globe, and the globe also tried to describe culture in terms of different dimensions, and they are very closely related to the Hofstede dimensions. Also here we have the power distance, which means the degree to which members of society expect power to be unequally shared. The uncertainty avoidance, like the uncertainty avoidance of Hofstede, is society's reliance on social norms and procedures to reduce the effects of unpredictable of future events, unpredictability of the future events. We have assertiveness, and here the extent to which society encourage people to be tough, confrontational, assertive, competitive, rather than modest and tender. Here we have a new dimension, which is the humane orientation that was not covered in the Hofstede model, and it talks about the degree to which society encourage and rewards individuals for being fair, self-sacrificing, generous, caring, and kind to others. And also we have the future orientation, which deals with the extent to a society encourage and reward future oriented behaviors such as planning, investing in the future, and delaying gratification. And it is also related to the long and short-term orientation of the Hofstede model. We also have the institutional collectivism, and here the collectivism that dimension of Hofstede. Here, according to the globe, we have two. One is related to the business, and other related to the in-group collectivism. For the institutional collectivism, it is the degree to which individuals are encouraged by societal institutions to be integrated into groups in organizations and society. These more with the business كمان collectivism, and to what extent business can care for each other, whereas in the in-group collectivism, it deals with the extent to which members of society take pride in membership in small groups such as families and their circle of close friends and organizations in which they are employed. We have gender differentiation, and here it's self-explanatory. It is the extent to which a society maximizes gender role differences as measured by how much status and decision-making responsibilities women have. And finally, we have the performance orientation, the degree to which a society encourage and reward group members for performance improvement and excellence. It's very important to understand cultures in these dimensions, and these dimensions were actually made so that we can compare between countries, because again, if you can describe a country but you cannot compare it with another country, then this information is not very useful. Okay, it's very important to understand that in the international business context, it's very important to measure the cultural distance. What do we mean by cultural distance? To what extent the home country culture is similar or dissimilar to the host country. The more the distance, the more it will be difficult to operate in such country, and the higher the risk. So that is why, and this is how we actually evaluate the cultural environment in the international context. Finally, we're talking about the global management in today's world, and we're talking about three very important things: the challenge of openness, or mainly we can see it as the challenge of globalization. We have the increased threat of terrorism. We have the economic interdependence of trading country. And I guess this part was highly, let's say, shaped in the COVID era, in which countries or economies now, they understood that being highly interdependent is not a very good thing, and they are rethinking of restructuring their global supply chains. So if you're interested in this part, you can read, there's a lot of articles about it, and it's actually very interesting. Also, we have intense fundamental cultural differences, and as we have mentioned before, we had two primarily arguments, which are the global culture argument, and that culture will always preserve their differences. The global culture, they were saying that because of globalization, we are expecting cultures to be more and more similar, whereas there is another stream of research that refute this notion and say that cultures will preserve more and more their differences during the coming time. Okay, it's very important to understand that in today's global management, I have to have a very good cultural intelligence. And what is cultural intelligence? Is to be aware of the different cultures. You have cultural awareness and sensitivity skills. That again, you do not do things from your own perspective. You have to know how different cultures interpret reality and the values and beliefs that they hold. Finally, in order to succeed in the global management today, you have to have something called the global mindset. And here we are dealing with attributes that allow a leader to be effective in cross-cultural environment. And this global mindsets, there is a very good book to read in Harvard called Global Cosmopolitans, and they are talking about what are the traits that global managers should have in order to succeed in the market. And they're talking about how people that were raised in different countries and they had to move from one country to another, they have the openness and the sensitivity and the cultural awareness to be good global managers. So finally, we'll see what the global mindset consists of. If you want to have the global mindset, you have to have this three capital: the intellectual capital, the knowledge of international business, and capacity to understand how business work on a global scale and how to analyze complex situations. And you're not afraid of ambiguity. You have to have the intellectual capital to be able to respond to such change. You have to have the psychological capital, which is to be open to new ideas and experience. And as we have mentioned, we have the global cosmopolitan. They are the ones who are actually good at this. And finally, we have the social capital, which is the ability to form connections and build trusting relationships with people who are different from you. Thank you for listening.